Hear these words. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not lack. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my feet and my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely the goodness of your love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. All right, I was a little intentional on cutting you all off there and reading that because we're talking about silence and solitude tonight. Not so much journaling, that's up there, but ignore that. But it is hard for us to get silent. It is hard for us to find solitude. And even when we try to sometimes, and we even do this with God's word, we rush into it with our busy lives and so forth. And so I'm going to start off with this again. And so like I set you guys up for that because that's how sometimes life is for us. It's loud, 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 loud. And then we come into God's word and hope to hear something from him and then get right back out into the loud, loud, loud life that we live. But this next time that I read through Psalm 23, before I read, let me just say that I am convinced that Psalm 23 is not just a psalm to be read at funerals. And these short 6 verses, I think David tells the story of Scripture. I'm convinced that we get to see who God is in these short 6 verses. And so as I read this next time, I want you guys, because I know that this is a familiar psalm for all of us, try your best to imagine hearing this for the first time. And so maybe for you, maybe you might have to just kind of close your eyes to try to intentionally listen. Maybe, we're all coming from something tonight, so maybe take a couple deep breaths, just to slow down the heart rate a little bit, to breathe. And as I read through this second time, on your sheet provided there for you, if you want, what is God doing? Where is God? What sounds restful in this? There's space for you to write down maybe a word that jumps out to you or a phrase that stands out to you, or even a picture that the Spirit puts into your mind as we go through this. So I want us to enter into this with a quiet heart and a quiet soul. So go ahead and quiet yourself, and I'll get started this next time, maybe a little more appropriately. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. And surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Take a second to just let it sink in what God is wanting you to hear in that. It was just this past, I'll give you guys, I see some people writing, so I'll let you guys You guys are already off to a great start, slowing down and listening. It was just last Sunday that Pastor Ron preached about how dumb sheep can be. And now that wasn't like his main message and that sort of thing, but he pointed out that, we are like sheep. We're dumb, we stray, we wander, we get lost, we get stuck. And we can't find our way back, or sometimes don't even want to find our way back, and we need this good shepherd to come and get us. And here in this psalm, Psalm 23, we have the good shepherd who provides food for us. He provides green pasture. And he provides drink by leading us by the still waters. And the fact that the good shepherd makes us to lie down there is more than enough in that place, in this place. That's why David is able to say, I lack nothing. It is a hard thing to get sheep to lie down. All right? I've also read that it's a hard thing to get sheep to drink. A shepherd can lead sheep to the green pasture. Doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily lay down. And a shepherd can lead sheep to the water. And it doesn't mean that a sheep is going to put its head down in the water and actually drink. Sometimes the shepherd has to force the sheep's head to the water. And we're like sheep. Does that sound a little too close to home? A little too familiar that we know where the green pastures are. We know where we can find the water, but do we always drink? Do we always feed? During creation, when God created the Sabbath, when he created this day of rest, it was always intended to be a foretaste of paradise, such that when God enters the rest of the seventh day, it's the only day in the entire 7-day week that God doesn't say, then there was evening and then there was morning. This rest was intended to continue forever. We know that was interrupted and messed up. But the goal of creation was to enter this rest with God and to enjoy him forever. However, it's challenging for us to see this or to get there, because my guess is that you are likely a member of the same cult that I'm a member of. Most of us are members of this cult. In his book, The Praise of Slowness, Carl Honor has said that we are all likely members of the cult of speed. Today, we no longer worry about the survival of the fittest. We're consumed with the survival of the fastest. And this cult of speed values efficiency over the heart. This cult of speed values timely results over truth. And this cult of speed, its influence is so deep, it invades how we cook. We have air fryers now. We have air fryer ovens, always getting it done faster. This cult of speed invades how we relax. All right? Sometimes feeling guilty for doing so, and other times finding ourselves in this place of not even knowing how to relax. And invades how we work. It touches almost every area of our life, this cult of speed. The results of living in this cult are very devastating to our souls. Because we were never designed to operate at the hyperspeed pace in which we are sometimes living our lives. And thus, we suffer a kind of sickness of the soul known as time sickness. And this was a term coined by a physician in 1982, Dace, I think is how you maybe say his last name. But Dace coined the term time sickness to define the belief that many people have about the fact that time is always slipping away, that there's never enough of it, and that we must go faster and faster to keep up. All right, and I think it's interesting that he thought about this idea of time sickness in 1982. That was a much slower world and pace 43 years ago. This sickness impacts our ability to experience what Jesus actually said about the Christian life. In John 10:10, we see that Jesus said that the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. The thief comes to steal, destroy, and to kill. But Jesus has come that we would have life to the full. But having this rich, satisfying life seems more like an illusion than it does a promise. It seems like the way that we read this verse, that we feel like more like things are being stolen from us and destroyed and not feeling satisfied and rich and full. I think it's interesting what John says just prior to this verse, in verse 9. He says, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved, and they will come in and go out, and they will find pasture. Jesus is saying, I am the gate. All who come in through me, they're going to find pasture. I think we can maybe say rest. So, before we talk about rest more, I think it's important that we actually spend a little bit of time talking about stress. All right? And I probably don't need to teach you guys at all about stress because we know it all too well. But stress is cumulative. It builds up rather than dissipates. We forget and ignore this when we live our lives with time sickness and the tyranny of the urgent. The lasting effects of living a life in such a stressed out state is well documented with heart attacks, gastrodigestive issues, cancer, anxiety disorders, insomnia, and other things. In 2003, that's 22 years ago, stress replaced backache as the number one cause of British workers staying home due to illness. 23 years ago, stress became the number one reason, for Brits to say, hey, I need to take a day off from work. Life has picked up since then as well. So some more current statistics. According to the World Health Organization, in 2002, 83% of U.S. workers suffer from work-related stress. And 54% of workers report that stress affects their home. That stress affects their home, their relaxation, their parenting, their marriage, their neighborhoods. And around a third of adults, 34%, reported that stress is completely overwhelming most days. So it's fair to say that we all experience some levels of stress. Then, when we feel down, lethargic, and zoned out, we try to look for the quick fix. We play a song to distract us. We go for a walk to get some fresh air. We maybe take something to numb what this gnawing emptiness inside of us might just be trying to alert us to. What might our soul be trying to alert us to that we're trying to ignore? Our souls are not a battery that can quickly be jump-started. We need a different approach. And what will it take to breathe life back into our battered souls so that we can connect with God again? The prevailing wisdom, which might not be all that wise in the first place, says being active and committed and attending every seminar that we can for our growth, personal development, and spiritual growth is what's good for us. Whew, that sounds overwhelming. That's wrong. That's not good. The rhythm of the soul, I think, requires us to re-examine how we really learn about God and how we experience the life that He passionately wants for us. Back in around 2010, I was a program director at this little Christian camp up in northern Michigan between Big Rapids and Cadillac, in a little town, Luther. Anybody ever heard of Luther? All right. So Luther's kind of out there, and this camp was out there. This camp was out there surrounded in the Manistee National Forest, and so we kind of were in the middle of nowhere. But upon pulling into this camp, the first sign that you would see would be still and know that I am God," which comes from the Psalm 46:10 that says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations, and I will be exalted in the earth." The phrase, "be still," doesn't necessarily mean inactivity, but rather a call to relax. Let go of anxieties and cease striving. It's an invitation for us to surrender to God's control and trust in His ability to handle situations. Boy, if we could all do that, that would be great. But that is hard to do. And I'm talking about myself. But be still and trust that God is in control. I first heard this from a Scottish Catholic priest, but I think it's a quote that maybe is attributed to Chuck Swindoll. But either one of them, they said, we need to slow down to catch up with Jesus. We need to slow down to catch up with Jesus. A life of prolonged busyness, engaging with people, performing tasks, and expanding our knowledge about God does not necessarily help us to experience God. More information, no matter how good it is, and it can be the best and the greatest, it does not yield a transformed life. Transformation and deep change is ushered in by experiencing God, not just knowing about God. We need to also experience God. And for that, stillness is required. Our problem, though, is that we don't know how to be still. We're not good at being still. What is still? Being still is maybe best defined as slowing down everything from our heart rate to our thoughts. Slowing down our thoughts. In order to do that, we must turn away from things. We must turn away from the usual, and it starts with TVs. All right, Calvin, I expect you not to have your TV on the next 4 days. No.
Might these 4 days.
Just because you're leaving this seminar, and but we must turn off our TVs for some times. Turn off our laptops, our phones. We need to even turn away from our friends and our spouse, and especially if we have kids. However, though, our turning away is so that we may return back to our family, our spouse, and our kids, refreshed and renewed. I brought this jar in here, and my guess is that this is how many of us feel. All right? It's a jar of water, and it's got some dirt in it, stirred up, messy, muddy, confused, unable to see clearly. The sediment that is swirling around in this jar is all of our busyness, our emotions, the thoughts, the inner wrestlings that we have trouble controlling and letting settle. And as this water sits still, without any motion whatsoever, the dirt inevitably will settle to the bottom, making it clear again. This is what stillness does. Being still helps the soul to feel settled and centered. Through the stillness and with time, the soul is better able to see what needs to be addressed and what the real issues are that need to maybe be explored in our lives. Stillness begins with what Jesus said. When Jesus said, "Consider the ravens. They don't sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than the birds. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? And later Jesus says, consider how the wildflowers grow. They don't labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. To consider means to think carefully. And to think carefully is going to take some time. Martin Luther, reflecting on Jesus, teaching about how he cares for the birds of the air and the flowers of the fields, Martin Luther said, let the birds become your teachers and the flowers your theologians. If considering a flower or a bird seems like a waste of time to you, stop and ask, why? To consider is to stop, to wait, to even linger. It's to pause, like Moses did when he was in the wilderness and he saw the burning bush. Moses could have kept on going about his way, not worrying about a bush that was on fire. I'm guessing that it wasn't on his property, so it really wasn't of his concern. It's not my bush, it's not my tree, But something stood out to him that caught his attention, that it wasn't burning up, and so he stopped. He went over to look at it, and then that is when God called to him. Now, to be sure, God was there the whole time, but he was waiting. He was waiting for Moses to turn, to pause, to consider, and to learn something that the Jewish scriptures never could have taught him. He experienced God. A couple years ago, I completed this program that was connected with Western over in Holland. It was called Soul Care, and that's pretty much self-explanatory. It was 2 years of trying to tend to our souls, and we would get together for these week-long seminars and trainings and so forth. And a lot of what we did was some of the hardest work I ever did in my life. We had to be still. We had to be quiet. We had to listen to God. We had 4 hours in the afternoon to do this. The goal was to be dark, not have phones, not have distractions, and to listen to God. And so during one of those times, even trying to keep myself like a little busy, because this was hard for me, I went for a walk, and I was walking in the woods, and I was trying to like walk slowly, like linger, pause, listen to the birds, I'm like, I'm trying to do this. I'd much rather just be like, like good Bible study. Come on, that's going to this is what I need, and something caught my eye. And I don't know who did this, but some person painted a little rock that was up against a tree. And so I'm like, that's weird. And it was purple. You don't see purple rocks. And if you see purple mushrooms, you probably shouldn't eat them. But so I go over and I pick up this rock. And on this rock, though, it had the word loved. Somebody painted loved on it. And in that moment, I was just like, I wonder if this is what these people are talking about. Like, is this what I needed to hear today? Like, that I'm loved by God? When we slow down, we start to see that we are loved apart from all of our activity, apart from what we do. We see that this God of ours, that he just genuinely loves us. Our world is noisy, and so are our hearts. We fear the quiet because it feels too scary. It can be in the quiet when we maybe think thoughts that we don't like so much. It can be in the quiet when we start to think maybe about how much we don't maybe like our life. Maybe in the quiet we hear, I'm miserable. maybe I should just end it. Sometimes for some, and I know that this sounds bleak, but staying busy literally means staying alive. As a family, we love this show Alone on the History Channel. Anybody ever watch this? All right, so I'm talking to my people right here. All right, but this is like a reality show that's not so much like reality. They take 10 contestants each season or whatever, and then they take them out to these remote places, and they have to film themselves. So there's not like a film crew over here. Like they have to like wear cameras and film themselves, and the whole setup is that like they have to see who can survive the longest. They have to build their shelter, find their food, find drinking water, and try to defend themselves, maybe against coyotes and cougars and bears and so forth. And so we love seeing who's going to outlast and stay alone the longest, who's going to survive the longest. And it's interesting watching this show because it's not the elements of getting food or water or shelter that does the people in. It's the isolation. It's often the isolation that gets them. And you see people wrestling on the History Channel. You see people wrestling with God sometimes as they're out there alone because it's just them and Creator. Now, I'm not advocating that we go off into the wilderness and try to survive for 65 days to encounter God. I think we can do that in shorter spurts. But we do have examples of people in the Bible escaping to the wilderness for quiet. And so Elijah was one of them. Under threat for his life, Elijah fled. He was tired, alone, and exhausted. And he was so depressed that he even prayed to God that he would take his life. So here's what it says. Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, and while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush, I don't know what that is, and sat down under it and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. What happened next is key to understanding how the soul of a person responds under such stress. We're told that Elijah, he was ready to throw in the towel. Lord, take me. I'm not going to ask you guys to show hands, but who's been there? I've been there. He confessed, I've had enough. When the soul is jarred, stirred, and stressed, the way to deal with this is stillness and rest. And this is precisely what Elijah did. It says, then he lay down under the bush and he fell asleep. Elijah teaches us the value of getting alone and being quiet. And then some of us know this story, but then after that time of rest, the Lord takes Elijah to go and stand on a mountain where God is going to pass him by. I thought it was kind of interesting. It's actually biblical, I think, then to vacation by mountains. The Bible says this is good to be by a mountain. When Elijah's standing there on that mountain, we see, then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after that, the fire came a gentle whisper. This is why we need to vacation near mountains, so that we can experience God. And in fact, it's actually proven that like the the blue and green hues of either oceans work too, but our mountains and trees is relaxing and calming to our bodies and to our minds. If God were to speak to us as a gale force wind or as an earthquake, we wouldn't need to be quiet. We would hear that. That's what, like, a lot of us, as I can only relate to teenage boys, but Lord, give me a sign. Should I marry this woman? And God never spoke to me in this like earthquake or gale force wind. If we want to hear him, we've got to be quiet, because he usually chooses to whisper. The invitation to solitude and silence is just that. It's an invitation to enter more deeply into the intimacy of relationship with the one who waits just outside of the noise and busyness of our lives. So after intense periods of output, effort, and expending energy, we are wise to take extended time off to give the soul some room to rest. It may seem like this can be done later, maybe when there's more time, but the reality for most of us is that there's never more time to squeeze in soul care. To squeeze in soul care, we must be intentional. It must be intentional. It must be scheduled, honored, and prioritized. I'm not sure that like many of us would really equate rest, sleep. In Elijah's story, he got to eat cakes. I don't know what that was like. With common spiritual disciplines like prayer and Bible study, but why not? Jesus himself said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, because I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." You and I must have the courage to give ourselves the permission to do what Jesus said we could do and should do. Rest. Lie down in green pastures. And I know that so many of us are trying to do our best, to do as we're told, but until we really stop and examine what Jesus means here, we might be missing caring for our souls. We can easily run on empty, cruise on autopilot until we crash. No one is going to give you permission to do what Jesus himself did, but yourself. The soul must stop, learn to be still, and rest. We must realize the desperate situation that our souls are in. This is another verse from a psalm that I really love, Psalm 42:1. And it reads, "As a deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God." And the reason I love this verse is because every time I would hear this verse, this was the picture that I would have in my mind of like, oh, this is restful. The deer he's going over there to put his head down and drink some water and be nourished by God and so forth. And then when I married a hunter and in a hunting family, and I learned about deer, one of the things that I learned when I would try to help my father-in-law track deer because he's colorblind and he can't see blood, is that when a deer gets shot, that deer makes a really wise choice. That deer knows that it's dying. And that deer, wherever that happens, will run to the closest source of water, because for that deer, water is life. So we must realize the desperate condition that our souls are in. So this is a more accurate picture of this verse. That might be a little gruesome. There are no kids here. But our souls are dying in this busyness of our lives. Our souls are in a desperate situation that pants for God. When we are caught up in the cult of speed and afflicted with time sickness, we are engaging with people in the world endlessly. But a soulful life includes a rhythm of together time and alone time. Sheep, they benefit enormously from regular daily and weekly reminders that we are sheep and not the shepherd. When we move too quickly through life, we tend to make poorer choices. We often prioritize the wrong things, and we begin to equate our very selves with the status that we have achieved or the accumulation of possessions that we have amassed. I love the practice that Mother Teresa had for her nuns. And her rules, she established a rigorous schedule of service accompanied by a thoughtful period of regular rest. Now, I know all of us are not in the situation where we're caring for orphans and the stress environment that Mother Teresa and her nuns found herself in, but this regular rhythm that she ordered for herself and her nuns was that they would one day a week not do any work but spend that day in the garden. And then 1 week a month, they would not have any work duties and they would be required to just be in the garden. 1 month out of the year, the same thing. And it was also 1 year out of 7 years that they were required to be still and just be in the garden. Mother Teresa understood the value of solitude and silence and stillness. She understood the value of turning away from others so that she could turn back to them refreshed and renewed. Now again, our environment maybe is not as intense as Mother Teresa's, hopefully. But without times of solitude, it is easy for us to lose our way. And regrettably, many of us have to hit a wall and feel the near loss of our souls before we are jarred into turning things around and learning to practice the beautiful discipline of silence and solitude. In silence and solitude, we gain back what we have lost. God has never left us. He never will. Again, He's always there, just waiting right outside of the noise and the busyness of our lives. But will we slow down? Will we slow down to catch up with Him? I want to share one last quote here as I kind of end this, and then I could talk about the practice that I gave you guys as well. But Henry Nouwen says this. He says, "Without solitude, it is virtually impossible to live a spiritual life." And then another quote of his, "We do not take the spiritual life seriously if we do not set aside some time to be with God and to listen to Him." And lastly, I would just say again, this jar, as it sits here long enough, it'll just be the dirt on the bottom, and we will be able to see clearly. But we need to slow down and be still to allow that to happen. And so in your guide, I gave you guys a way to practice this. So we could just poke through this real quick here. And I encourage you guys all to do this. Choose a time and a place in which you can be alone on a regular basis. Maybe it's a place in your house. Maybe it's something outside. Maybe it's a park. If you were here when I was talking about prayer, a lot of times Catholic churches, you can utilize the quietness of their sanctuaries. Turn off music and TV. Don't bring your phone with you. And maybe consider bringing an artifact into this place, maybe a candle, something that helps you to be present to God's presence with you. We used to start every meeting during our soul care times by lighting a candle. And it was just a way that, we could just remind ourselves that, like, God is present with us. Like, the candle just kind of symbolized that for us. But what I really want to highlight here is number 2. Regular practice is more important than the amount of time spent in silence and solitude. All right? Regular practice is more important than the amount of time. And so start off slowly. Nobody goes out and runs a marathon right away. You have to work up to it. It takes a while to quiet our minds. It takes a while to get quiet and still. And I'll let you guys kind of read through the rest of these, but you guys don't need to do that right now. But please do try this. Calvin, it doesn't need to be the next 4 days. For those of you who know, March Madness is starting tomorrow. But let me just share one other example. Again, when I was intentionally practicing some of these, it's hard for me to sit. I like to keep moving, and so sometimes I still have to move during this. And so I was riding my bike, and I was riding my bike though. Then I'm riding my bike and I'm talking to God, and I'm just trying to listen, and I'm riding by all these rows of pine trees, and I was riding. The path was on a diagonal, and so it was interesting. It just really stood out to me all of a sudden because pine trees are planted in these rows. But as I was riding on a diagonal, like you'd see like all the chaos of the trees, and then you'd see like a real quick glimpse of like the neat rows, all the chaos, neat rows. And I just really felt like God was saying, Kirk, there's a lot of chaos, but there's also a lot of order. It may look chaotic, but I have a plan here. I have everything in order. And so, and so that's just like one example. And I was just like, that really kind of refreshed me. So hopefully, and I know that if you find times to be quiet and alone, you will experience God as well.